Viewers of the channel are aware that I am the world's biggest Robert Venditti mark, and he actually agreed to join me. How you doing, Robert?
I'm doing pretty good, Wes. I appreciate you having me on.
Well, I really appreciate you making the time. I'm an enormous fan. I've liked all of your work. Really, I discovered Surrogates after X-O Manowar, but I've pretty much read everything that you've done all the way through. There's only a few clunkers in there. Almost all of them are big-time winners.
Everybody has an off day, right?
Absolutely. If you set the bar as everything's really good, even just the good stuff feels like maybe it's not quite there, right?
Well, you know what I always say is it's art. You know what I'm saying? And
subjective.
Yeah, no, not just that. I mean, there's definitely some things I've done that haven't come out necessarily the way I wanted them to either. But I don't ever feel like I do the safe thing. You know, like I could have very easily after Surrogates just done sci-fi for the rest of my life, you know. But I consciously didn't do that. I always want to try different things and get outside my comfort zone. And the necessary result of that is that sometimes it doesn't work out maybe exactly how you wanted, but to me, that's how you grow as a writer, you know, if challenging yourself and doing different things. So they're all bricks in the wall. And ultimately, if I look back and I like where I'm at in my career and I like the projects I'm working on, then I can't really go mess with that wall, right? And, you know, if I put one of those bricks out, the wall comes down. So
you bet 950. It's not like we're not talking like there's maybe a clunker here or there. What's interesting, you know, I discovered comics a little bit later in life, like in my 30s. And I know you kind of had the same trajectory, but maybe you wanted to be a writer, but somewhere along the way, I think maybe you were working at a bookstore and you discovered comics.
Yeah. So I never read them growing up. I was working, I was in grad school getting my master's in creative writing to do prose writing, you know, and I was working at a Borders in Winter Park, Florida, and a guy that I worked there with, I'm still really good friends with today, he was a real big comic book guy. He was always talking about comics. And finally, one day, he kind of cracked me by talking to me about a series called Astro City, which is Kurt Busiek, Brett Anderson, Alex Ross did the covers. And the story sounded interesting. It was the Confession story arc, which is about a priest who has a moment of weakness and gets bitten by a vampire and becomes a vampire, but still stays as a priest, you know? And that sounded really interesting to me. So I went and read it and I liked it and kind of decided overnight that I was going to try to read comics. So I was in my mid to late 20s at that point. And that was when I got my start. You know, that was around 2000.
Yeah, I had a very similar trajectory myself. I was in the military, and there are a lot of comic readers in the military. So we'd be talking, and next thing you know, my buddy Shazam was bringing in copies of Red Sun and The Dark Knight Returns and a Superman for All Seasons. He was a big DC guy. Yeah. I was like, okay, these are a little bit more interesting than I gave him credit for.
Sure, yeah. Yeah. I mean, those are all great places to start, you know? So
yeah, once you get in there, like I quickly discovered, you know, comic books are just like the best storytelling medium because like there's no limits other than your imagination. You're not working on a budget. You know, you can make any world you want. You don't have to describe it all, you know, word for word. You can have the artist do so much work for you.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Yeah. When I adapt the Percy Jackson and the Olympians novels, I make comics out of all those. And when I sat down to do the first one, I was sort of intimidated by it because here's a 300 and some page novel that I have to fit into, you know, 128 page graphic novel. But really you start to see early on, you know, the first time Percy goes to camp and he describes the way Camp Half-Blood looks, it goes on for pages and pages and pages. That's one splash page from an artist.
It's a splash.
Yeah. So it really is interesting how much information you can fit into a comic.
So were you just like a duck to water when it came to comic books? I know you were interested in comics. I guess something was happening at Top Shelf and like you started working in their warehouse or something?
Yeah, so I decided I wanted to write comics, but I had no idea how to go about it. It wasn't, you know, back then like it is now where you can go to the bookstore and there's probably a shelf full of books about how to get into comics or whatever, you know. Back then there really wasn't a lot of information. But I live in the Atlanta area, and there's an independent publisher that's still based here, even though they're an imprint of IDW now. Actually, they're not even based here. They've moved to South Carolina. But at the time, they were based here. And they sent out an email saying that a distributor of theirs had gone bankrupt and sort of left them in lurch for a lot of money and invoices that were due. And they were asking to get some orders direct through their website to raise, I think the number was maybe $20,000 or something, so they could get through some printer bills and keep the company afloat. They ended up getting over 1,000 calls and like $80,000 worth of orders in like one day. And just because I live locally, I emailed the guy and I said, I don't have a lot of money or anything. I can't really afford to buy a bunch of books, but I've worked in bookstores and I've done pack and ship and I've worked in warehouses, all my life. These are the jobs I've always had. I know my way around a box and a tape gun, or I can answer phones or do any of those kinds of things, And he was like, what I really need is somebody to work in the warehouse and help me out. So I was like, cool. And I went there and volunteered to pack boxes for them. And I think by the end of that first day, he asked me if I wanted to come work for him, part-time. And then within, I don't know, less than a year, I would say, he was asking me if I wanted to go full-time working for him. So, that was how I got my start in comics.
So the whole time were you working on surrogates? Obviously, that was your first big break that went through Top Shelf.
I started writing surrogates while I was working for them. I think a lot of people maybe will hear this story and their takeaway will be like, oh, I just got to find a way to get into a company and then I can start shoving my stuff in people's hands. Like, I never really did that. I always took that job very seriously. Like, they're paying me to do a job here and work in this warehouse. And even though I've got a master's degree, I'm going to do that job to the best that it needs doing. And then if there's time left after that, I'll talk to them about stuff that I want to do or whatever, And so I would go do a lot of conventions. Me and Chris Staros, who was the editor, we had a very heavy convention circuit that we would do back then. And we drove everywhere because we had brought all the books with us. So we'd be in Chicago, and then we'd be in New York, and we'd go back to New York, and we'd be in D.C. and Ohio, everywhere. So he and I would just talk in the car. And I was writing surrogates. And one day while we were driving, I told him about it. And he said it sounded like a really interesting idea. And so when I handed him the script, I was like, this isn't what Top Shelf does. It's much more mainstream. But if something you can introduce me, if you think it's worthy, to an editor at Dark Horse or at Vertigo or something, I'd appreciate it. He read the script and he really liked it, and so they decided they wanted to publish it themselves, and that was how I ended up doing my first book through them.
It's pretty crazy because it ends up being a movie with Bruce Willis. You end up being an answer on Jeopardy.
Yes, I was an answer on Jeopardy. Yeah, and it is crazy. None of that, obviously, did I think would ever happen. My biggest aspiration for that first book was that I'd finally have a publication credit. Here will be something that I could give to editors and say, this is how I write, this is how I develop character, this is what my themes are, things like that. And nobody would ever read it, but it would help me get future work, And I remember going to San Diego the year that the first issue of Surrogates came out. This would have been July 2005. And I'm there as an employee. I'm setting up the booth and unpacking pallets full of books and getting the table ready and all the displays and all that. I go back to my hotel and clean up so I can come back and work for preview night. And the doors open, and within 10 minutes, there were producers at the table asking me if I knew who controlled the rights to Surrogates. Because I was an employee of the booth. I wasn't like there as a guy who wrote Surrogates. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was really surreal. And all those things ended up coming together, and it got made into a movie, and it did end up being something to help me get a lot of work, but not in the way that I thought it would necessarily,
Well, it's crazy because Surrogates is almost ahead of its time. It's almost, not like far out predictive, but, people kind of staying at home and their avatars are out there and engaging with people rather than themselves. It almost feels like, we've kind of forced to do this, more for the past 2 years than we had before, but there's a lot of people that are kind of operating like that.
Yeah, I've actually had a lot of people reach out to me over the years that were scholars, like professors or things like that, writing, papers about post-humanism and things like that. And they call me to interview me and talk to me about surrogates. And I didn't write it again for any of that. I just wrote it based on something that I thought was where society was going. And this was pre-social media. This was an era of chat rooms, but I knew people who would just hang out in chat rooms all day and sort of talk about their appearance in ways that wasn't real. You know what I mean? And just having this idea of the way technology can sort of allow you to create a persona for yourself that's a complete separate identity from these sort of immutable characteristics of human existence that we used to consider, you know, being what they are, you know, height and you know, eye color and skin color and things like that. And technology allows us to redefine all those things. So it's nothing that I'm cheering on, you know. I'm very
predicted Second Life.
Yeah, I'm very much a go out in the world and because I wrote Surrogates in 2002. That's when I wrote. It took a little while to come out, but I wrote it in 2002. And so we seem to be trending in a direction that's going to end up that way. And I don't know that I necessarily champion that, but
it's more of a warning rather than a
recently and say what you said. You know, like, dude, you thought of this a long time ago. You know, but.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy. And so that was like a mini series. Obviously, you had the sequel to that, and then your first real ongoing, which is what a lot of people that come to the channel are going to know you from. Like, really, was it Valiant Comics, correct?
Yeah, I didn't do. I did the Surrogates, and I did the follow up to that, and then I did another original graphic novel for Top Shelf called Homeland Directive. That was like a political medical thriller, and then I did some Percy Jackson adaptations. And then the next thing I did, you know, the first sort of monthly serialized comic book I ever wrote was X-O Manowar #1. Yeah.
And I imagine a lot of people, you know, if they go into the character and they see the way that he's described and the way that he kind of plays out, they're going to assume that you read Eric Abdasia, X-O Manowar, you know, all through your childhood, and you've been dreaming of this moment for your entire life.
Yeah.
But really, you hadn't done. You didn't know a whole lot about the character. I'm assuming going in, you probably went back and read the Jim Shooter stuff and then prepared how you would like to go forward with it.
Yeah, I remember when Warren Simons, who was the executive, who was the editor-in-chief of Valiant and is now editor-in-chief and co-CEO of Bad Idea, when he reached out to me, and just going back to Surrogates for a minute, you know, Surrogates comes out, I'm back in the warehouse working, you know. Even after the movie came out, I still worked at Top Shelf in their warehouse, you know. And I went to New York working for Top Shelf to do a convention there called MoCA. And I took some copies of Surrogates and I went and visited the Marvel offices. And while I was there, I met Warren Simons. I gave him a copy of the Surrogates. I don't believe he read it. This would have been 2009, I think. I don't believe he read it. But when they were going to launch Valiant and they were sort of building it in 2011, he went to this bookshelf he had in his house and was looking for some stuff, some writers maybe he hadn't tried or things like that. And he pulled it down off the shelf and he read it. And he gave me an email. He dropped me an email to ask me if I'd be interested in pitching. And I said to him, I'm going to be honest with you. Not only have I never heard of any of those characters that you just mentioned to me, I've never heard of Valiant. I don't even know what that is, you know, because I started reading comics after Valiant had come and gone. Yeah. And he said, that's perfect. That's exactly what I want. I want somebody who will have a fresh take on these characters. So he sent me like a 2 or 3 page, in my memory, it was like a 2 or 3 page document about a bunch of the characters, but the one I wanted to do was X-O Manowar, because it was just, you know, it was such a crazy mashup of genres. You know, I try to do something different with everything I work on, and there's nothing like X-O Manowar, you know. So he said, I was looking at that one, and then I said, I'm interested in this one. And they sent me this collection that had the first, I believe, 6 issues of the original X-O Manowar run. It was a hardcover. And I read those 6, and that was it. I based my entire pitch, which was like a 12-page document, off those 6 issues. After the pitch was approved and they said, you're okay, we want you to write X-O Manowar, then I went and I read the entire Jim Shooter run of X-O so I could know the history of the character.
You didn't do the Acclaim stuff, right?
I did not read the Acclaim stuff. I had no interest in reading it because it didn't pertain to what I was doing. And I don't know, the way I kind of always talk about it, and it was very similar with Hawkman, I think that the one asset that I have, I would like to think I have a lot of assets as a writer. Everybody's got holes in their games too, but I think one asset I have that a lot of people can't claim is that I really don't know anything about any of these characters. So I don't come to them from the background. I don't come to them from the background that you just said. where I read it when I was a kid, and I've always wanted to write an X-O Manowar story. No knowledge of this character whatsoever. So I come to it with a completely new perspective. And the way I always say it, you know, self-deprecatingly, is you can't fake stupid. Like if I had been reading X-O Manowar all my life, I could never go back and pretend I didn't. You know what I mean? It's already in there. If I'd already been reading Hawkman all my life, I would know that Katar Hol and Carter Hall are two separate characters, and they can never be the same. But I don't know that. So my first thought is, well, obviously these must be the same guy, right? And so I make these connections that maybe lifelong comic book readers aren't able to make because I just don't have that background. Yeah.
So what's insane is I get in there, and I just retired from the military. I'm with my wife, my kids, and like X-O Manowar issues 1 through 14. I believe Kerry Nord illustrates all those, correct?
No, he did 1 through 4, and then Lee Garbett did 5 through 8, which was the Ninjak arc where we introduced Ninjak to the universe, and then Trevor Hairshine did 9 and 10. And then Kerry did 11 through 14.
Yeah.
And that's sort of the first big arc of X-O Manowar. Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I was sitting here, I was having a very difficult time, and that's why this story means so much to me. And, you know, I was just in a very bad place, and I kind of read this story. And I remember when my wife woke up, because we were in the hospital with my son who had pneumonia, and we were, you know, just retired at the time, and I couldn't wait to talk to her about it. I was like, you are not going to believe the story that I read. And I was showing her the images of it. She was very happy that something exciting had happened for me. And that's you know, just more the first moment I realized that I was an enormous Robert Venditti fan. And the way I explained issues 1 through 14, almost, you know, from my perspective, you know, it almost feels like a retelling of like Exodus, but sci-fi.
Yeah, no, very much. Yeah, we're going to get a little deep in the weeds here. You know, that's cool. A lot of people don't ask me questions like this about X-O, so it's cool to talk about it. I mean, we're coming up. May will be 10 years since I wrote X-O Manowar #1, right? So it's cool to be talking about this much much later. But first of all, thank you so much. You know, I mean, I don't say it. Oh shucks, you know, like I mean it sincerely when I say that's incredible that I could write a story and that somebody in the Philippines could read it. Like this is unfathomable to me. You know, I grew up sort of a, you know, blue collar kid in South Florida, and I don't even come from a family of big readers, you know, much less anybody who wrote. I mean, my mother was a reader, and she always was giving me books. My grandfather was a reader, but like my father, I don't think I ever saw him open a book in his life, you know. He worked in construction, and he sold concrete, you know, and the idea that I would write something someday that somebody in the Philippines could even read, whether they hate it or like it, is crazy. It's fiction, you know, so that I could do that, and then you could have a reaction to it like that. It just means the world. It never gets old for me. Every time somebody asks me to sign a book, it surprises me every time, you know. But to get back to X-O Manowar, I think if you look at those first 14 issues, but even if you go the whole 57-issue run or whatever, it's a messianic story, you know. Even to the point where in issue 1, Eric is taken into the sky on Easter. Like that's the day that the aliens come and grab him, you know. And then that's a historical fact. That there really was that attack that took place when the Romans attacked the Visigoths. They did it on Easter because they knew the Visigoths would be celebrating the Easter holiday, and so they chose that moment to strike, you know. But it's very much a story about faith, and there's certainly shades of Exodus in there. You know, one of the story arcs is even called Exodus. There's a line that I can't remember exactly when the high priest says it, but it might be in Book of Death, but it could be later on. I honestly can't remember. But he says faith isn't about getting what you hope for, it's about finding hope in what you're given, you know. And that's sort of a theme of the series. I think you can read X-O Manowar and you can look at the Vine religion and you can say they got it all wrong. They thought they were going to have this champion and it was going to do all these things, and that never happened. Or you could read it and say it happened exactly the way it was supposed to happen, but you know
they couldn't understand it.
They didn't anticipate it happening the way it did, but it actually happened exactly that way, you know. And so I think maybe those kind of elements of the story are what make it something that a lot of people have been able to read and find something in, because it's a new mythology with a new character. You can start at a #1 and you can kind of see that long form story. And if you just want to read it for the action and things, you can do that too. It's there. But if you see something a little bit, you know, if you're looking for things below the surface, those things are there too. And it's certainly something I try to do with a lot of my writing.
That's exactly the way I explained it to multiple people. I was like, listen, if you want this story, and I was like, I did it, issues 1 through 14 feel like the best modern telling of Exodus I've ever seen, except for it's sci-fi. But if you don't want to see that, you won't see it. Like, you have to be kind of it has to grab you, and because it's not going to like slash you over the head with a hammer on it, but it's absolutely there if you want to discover it. I was like, that's what makes it great.
Yeah, I definitely try to do that with my writing as well. And you use the hammer thing, and I say that all the time. You know, like there's plenty of entertainment, whether it's a movie or a TV show or a book or a comic or whatever. There's no shortage of examples where when you they should sell it to you and it should come with the hammer. So you just beat yourself on the head, you know, and that's fine. That's the way a lot of people like to write. Obviously, it's very popular, but for me, I try very hard when I write that you forget about the existence of Robert Venditti. You know what I mean? Like, I want you to know what my characters think about things. I don't ever want you to know what I think about things, because once you know what I think about things, that will now imprint on all of my writing, and people will think you know what I'm trying to say? Like, I'm all about you getting lost in the story, and my characters can say their points of view, and there'll always be characters that say an opposite point of view, you know? But I try very hard to get people lost in the story. If I wanted to express definitive ideas about things, then I would go write essays, you know? I would be an editorial writer or something like that, you know, which is great. I love editorials. I love essays, you know. But for me, when I'm watching a film or watching a TV show or reading a book, I want to be swept up in that world, and I want it to ask me questions and challenge me with things. But I want ultimately the answers to be left up to me. I don't want you to tell me about the answers, you know? And so a lot of times I'll write about things that I don't know the answer to, because I can't express an answer if I don't. And Surrogates is a great example, right? Is technology good or is technology evil? I don't know. So I wrote a story about it. I wrote a whole story about it, and I still don't know the answer. It might be a question that doesn't have an answer, you know? But maybe I can make the readers think about those things a little bit when they read it, you know?
Absolutely. I love the character of Eric Dabdasia. It's such an interesting thing. It's almost the simple way to put it is like if you took Conan the Barbarian and you put him in an Iron Man suit. You know, he's the ultimate bull in a china shop. He cannot contain himself. He's always looking for conflict. That's the only way he knows how to sell anything. At least when he's first introduced, that he's always breaking stuff. And I like the character arc and the progression as he's kind of becomes more nuanced over time and realizes he has responsibilities, and maybe not everything can be handled with the sword, even though he does have this ultimate power suit that he can't be kind of stopped.
Yeah, it's a huge journey for him, and I would say that's the other, you know, primary long-running theme throughout the series is sort of an examination of the concept of heroism and how it evolves over time. Because when he gets taken in, you know, the 4th century AD, the definition of a hero was somebody who could go out on the battlefield and chop off as many heads as he could in as little of amount of time. That made you a hero, you know? He gets this suit of armor and is returned to the modern day where he's living in our world now. And he's still doing the things that defined a hero when he was then. But now those are war crimes. And he doesn't understand that. You know, like, I'm the guy on the battlefield with the best weapon. I'm just going to take off all the heads. Hero time. You know what I mean? Like, we're done.
He starts conquering whole countries immediately.
Yeah, he just drops off. He's like, I'm going to take this over now, you know? But that's not the way the world worked anymore. And so he had to learn how to be a hero in the modern era, you know? And so I think there's also that aspect of it as well, which certainly we all do. We take our modern day ethics and we project them onto history going backwards, you know. And so I sort of wanted to show what that would be like for somebody who literally had to live in that moment, you know.
Yeah, I really like that progression. Obviously, the character. The other character, I don't. Obviously, you haven't really read or written Bloodshot very often. I always thought he was really, really interesting. Obviously, one of the first comics I ever read when I started reading was Watchmen, which was a bad idea.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't quite get what I was experiencing when I read Watchmen, maybe what Dr. Manhattan was all one of the
first things I read as well was Watchmen, you know. And it's crazy, right? Like you're chasing that high for the rest of your life, you know? But yeah, go ahead.
So the way I've described Bloodshot, he's almost like he's a Dr. Manhattan. He doesn't know if he's even human anymore. Like, what is humanity is kind of what he's discovering, but he's absolutely bloodthirsty. I was like, what an interesting concept for a character.
Yeah, Bloodshot's one of the ones that that was actually the one that Warren wanted me to pitch for, was Bloodshot. But I felt because of the, you know, sort of the themes of, you know, what is humanity and technology and all that, I felt it would have been
pigeonholed you
too much like Surrogates, you know.
Yeah.
And so that's why I did X-O Manowar instead. But I do like Bloodshot as a character. I like Ninjak as a character, which I know sounds ridiculous, but I do. I always wanted to write. I love Eternal Warrior as a character.
That's
you know, I loved the Eternal Warrior series that I was able to do for Valiant. They had a lot of really good characters in their stable. Bloodshot, I only wrote. He popped in like to Armor Hunters, and I would write him, you know, in the core Armor Hunter series, and he was tremendous fun to write. You know, like I remember talking with Warren as we were dialoguing. I think the 4th issue, and Bloodshot shows up. He's been missing from this big battle this whole time, and he finally shows up in a big truck, and he gets out, and he has just thrown the head of one of the Armor Hunters on the ground, and he's got his guns all over him and whatever, and he's like, sorry I was late, traffic was murder, you know. It's so like absurd, but it's fun. It's, you know, and ultimately I think that's what we should be doing too. We should be enjoying ourselves and having fun, and, you know, I don't know, trying to entertain. No.
Absolutely. So that's the other thing I liked about your run at Valiant, and I love Valiant. I think it's like the perfect shared comic universe. I don't think it's been done better in modern times. But it's like when you finally, you know, you get in there, you get these really deep stories that you're getting in X-O Manowar, and then when you get into Armor Hunters, it's like, well, there's a story there, and there's certainly some deep meaning, but we're going all out action. We're gonna have some fun. Kind of same thing with Book of Death, maybe to a lesser degree. That one's more intrigue and more tension.
Yeah, it was a quieter story. Yeah.
Yeah. I loved it. It's like, man, this is how you do an event.
Yeah, they're not
issues that go balls to the wall.
Yeah, Warren really had to work with me on. I mean, you know, I'm somebody who's never written a monthly comic book in my life, and within a year, I'm planning a line-wide event. You know what I mean? Like, we really worked a lot on those stories. You know, especially Armor Hunters, because it was the first one. And Doug Braithwaite just did such a phenomenal job. You know, it was so much story to put into only 4 issues.
Yes.
Valiant was very, very adamant about 4-issue arcs. You know, 4 issues, 4 issues, 4 issues. Make a trade, get it out there. Always have it where people can read and catch up and things. You know, but the amount of information that Doug was able to fit in those 4 issues, you know, to be able to draw pages that were pretty crowded but still make them feel like wide open and epic. I would say, you know, him and Brian Hitch are probably the 2 artists I've worked with that were really masters of that technique, where they could make it panel 1 of a 6-panel page and make it feel like it was this big sweeping image, you know. You know, I couldn't still very, very proud of all that stuff. You know, there's a couple of arcs of X-O that didn't turn out exactly the way I wanted, you know. But on a whole, all my work at Valiant, I'm still really proud of. You know, I think it holds up. So.
Oh, absolutely! It's when people come to me and they start asking me where they should start, I was like, if you want a shared comic universe, just go start at X-O Manowar #1. You'll meet Ninja K, and you could get going, and you're gonna have such a good time, and you know, discovering all that stuff for the first time.
Yeah, there's a huge fan base out there for it. I mean, I don't know that it's always necessarily reflected in the sales, but, you know, I'm a comic book writer. It's not like I'm famous or anything, but I do get noticed once in a while, you know, in an airport or, you know, I don't know, a restaurant or something like that. And what I mean by that is I'm not even at a convention. I'm just somewhere, and somebody will be like, "Are you Robert Venditti?" You know, and 9 times out of 10, whoever it is that noticed me, it's a Valiant fan. Yeah.
I'm surprised it's not more Hawkman fans. This is the next thing I want to talk about. Obviously, you mentioned Brian Hitch had a wonderful initial 12-issue story arc. It's a beautiful story there. I like throwing in number 13 on there as well because I think that's a great one-shot. And it's another one of those things. I think a lot of people, when they read that, and I know I'm good friends with Tim. Well, I'm not good friends. I'm friends with Tim Board over at Hawkboard. Obviously, he's in Asia as well. I imagine he assumed that you had been the biggest Hawkman fan like himself when he read that. And it's one of the things, the way I describe kind of what you do with these characters is we've been looking at Hawkman from this direction, right? We see the outline and we kind of can see the facade and everything. Is you go, well, let's go look at him from the other side. It's the same character, but we're doing it with the new angle, and there's other things that we didn't realize, or edges that were there that we didn't know that were there all along. So you're not changing the character, you're just looking at it from another perspective, which gives you maybe a deeper appreciation or a different avenue to explore the character.
Yeah, again, going back to what I said before, can't fake stupid, right? Like I had not been staring at that outline my whole life, right? The different angle that I came and looked at it at was my first angle, And so the thing about Hawkman that intrigued me is, again, everybody has weaknesses in their game, but I think one of my strengths is that I'm a very good puzzle piece writer. And I've said this before, but what I mean by that is I think you could dump just about anything on my desk and I will find a way to make sense of it, And Armor Hunters was my first test of that. Juggling this line-wide event, making a role for everybody, and making all those pieces fit, not just with the core series, but the 4 books that were tying into it, and doing all that. I was like, I think I'm good at this aspect of comic book writing, and it's an important part of comic book writing because when you're working in shared universes, there are always, pieces that get dumped on your table. All I knew about Hawkman, other than the visual of him from like the Super Friends cartoon or whatever, was that he was the reputation of having the most confusing character in all of comics.
He dies a lot.
That intrigued me because I was like, this is the ultimate puzzle. If I can fix this puzzle, then what can't I do? And also it means that there's an opportunity here. If somehow I am able to fix it, we'll have left a stamp on this character that goes back to the 1940s. And that's hard to do now. Like so many characters have had defining runs and they've had their stamp put on them at least once, if not multiple times. Jeff Johns on Green Lantern, Mark Waid on Flash, a dozen people on Batman, But Hawkman, this was an opportunity to maybe put a stamp on it. And that was what intrigued me about doing the pitch. And so I sat down to do my research that first night. And, I do what I always do. I just Googled, Hawkman. And I get the Wikipedia entry and I start reading it. And very early on, I was like, oh, I get it. The Thanagarian and the Egyptian are the same guy. They just reincarnate across time and space. And I read all of it, and that never happened. And I said, well, then that's the story. That's exactly how I fix it. Now there's no more of this. Because I went through it with Green Lantern, right? The John fans hate the Hal fans, and the Hal fans hate the Kyle fans, and everybody hates Guy. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, I don't want to have competing fan bases anymore. I don't want to go write Hawkman and have the Thanagarian and the Egyptian fans arguing over each other. I want to make it, this is your Hawkman. I don't care which Hawkman you read, it's your Hawkman, And when Brian read the pitch, now Brian is someone who is a lifelong fan and reader, and I would almost say, student of DC Comics growing up in the UK. He immediately understood how that would work, but then also understood the enormous potential of that, right? We're not just talking Thanagarians and Egyptians anymore. We're talking Kryptonians and all these other things, And so working with Brian, who's just an absolute master of the medium, that's a given as an artist. We know this to be true, right? That's indisputable. But he's an incredible storyteller in a writing sense as well, And it was just such a great partnership working with him. and there was nothing that I could come up with in a script. I realized after the first issue, there's nothing.
You got the giant gorilla.
Yeah, there's nothing I can write on paper that he's not going to be able to render and make it look amazing, you know. And that's just such an asset, because now you have these things where we go to the microverse and you've got Tiny Hawkman and Giant Atom, you know, and you go to Krypton and you've got, you know, the Kryptonian Hawkman, and you every issue you're in a different planet doing a different thing with a different language, a different architecture, and he's doing all of it, you know, and it's just amazing. I mean, I'd work with him anytime he ever wanted to, you know, and we still talk once in a while today. He's just a great person and a wonderful collaborator. And what we were able to do together in those first 12 issues of Hawkman, I do feel we put a stamp on the character. Somebody may come along after us and ruin it. I don't know. But for the time being, we fixed it, and we fixed it in a way that in retrospect seems so easy and so simple that one of the biggest comments that I get is, I can't believe you fixed it with like 2 words. With like 2 words and 1 double-page spread, you guys fixed Hawkman, you know? And that's a nice feeling. So.
Another interesting character is he's obviously a lot different than Eric Adasia, where Eric Adasia is a great warrior, but he's going to get into anything. The way he fixes things or fights. So you get into Carter Hall, fantastic warrior. You don't want to mess with him, but he'd rather fix things with his mind. He wants to go discover history. He wants to go put these puzzles together, kind of like yourself. But then if you push him, well, you're going to find out that maybe that was a bad idea.
Yeah, yeah. There's definitely been different ways the characters have been written over the years. Like they've definitely done like Berserker mode Hawkman, you know. That never made a ton of sense to me because he is an archaeologist. And being somebody who reincarnates, even if it's not time and space, he's just reincarnating on Earth, the original concept of the character, there would be a necessary appreciation of history and culture there. You know, he wouldn't want to go smash everything with a mace. The way I always talk about him is he's never going to hit you first, but he's going to hit you last, you know? And, you know, he's not going to jump out of the gate fight. But if you pick a fight with him, he's going to win, you know? And that's kind of the way that I try to approach the character, to make him a thinking warrior. And I've spoken with Tim in interviews and things like that. I don't know if he's ever said, you know, when they announced me and I had no knowledge of the character or whatever, I don't know if he was nervous, you know, if he was scared.
I can tell you right now he was excited because
I know he likes what we did. I know he likes what we did after the fact, but I wonder if he was scared, you know. I wouldn't have been.
A little bit.
Yeah.
Makes sense. So did you have that ending mapped out when you started? Because there's so many comic books. You know, I understand sometimes your run gets cut short. Maybe you had a long-term plan, you just never got there, or you were going somewhere and the publisher made you change it, and maybe you don't end up where you thought you were going to. But it felt like the perfect ending for Hawkman. No one had ever seen an ending like that. He always dies. And in this one, you know, he doesn't get a life anymore. There's no more resurrection. But he's like living forever with the love of his life, like happy.
Yeah. I knew that I wanted to take away the reincarnation aspect of the character and have him be on his last life. I knew that pretty early on because I think, like you say, he always dies. And it's such an out for the character. It's boring, you know, so I wanted to, I don't know, maybe make people think about the character in a different way. But I thought of that ending where he ends up in the future, you know, of the Legion of Superheroes and all those kinds of things, pretty early on, but it wasn't something I knew going in. But it's like you say, in serialized comics, I mean, 29 issues, that's 2.5 years. I know where I start at, and I have a good idea where I'm going to end at. Like, I had a good idea where X-O Manowar was going to end, but I didn't know if it was going to end in 24 issues. It was literally arc by arc. I'd write an arc, and they'd call me, and they'd be like, all right, we're going to do another one, you know? All right, we're going to 36 now. All right, we're going to 40. We're going to go to 50. And I know where my end point is. I just have to keep filling in the middle, you know? So I knew where we were going to start. I knew where we were going to end. I didn't know there was going to be, you know, you're the villain, or that he was going to have to get infected, or any of these other things that had to happen. Those are puzzle pieces that got dropped on the desk. It's like, now you got to figure out what to do with this. But I did know that ultimately he was going to end up with Hawkwoman, and it would be far in the future. and that was how I wanted to end the series.
When did you come up with the idea for like the atonement, where he had this mammoth, I don't know, like sin that was sitting over him, and he had to like make up for it for the rest of time? And
it was early on. Yeah, it was before.
Because it makes kind of sense, you know. Hawkman kind of looks like an angel; he's an angelic figure.
Yeah, no, I think maybe right around. I knew I had broad strokes of it, you know. I used to know, and if you wanted me to walk off camera, if you wanted me to walk off camera, I could get my journal. I still have my journal right over there where I plotted the whole issue of Hawkman, and I date everything. I could be like, it was on this day, but it wasn't part of my original pitch, you know. Mm-hmm. I don't recall it being a part of my original pitch, but it was very long after getting the job that I thought that this would be an interesting way to approach it. I didn't know if DC was going to go along with it, you know. Because again, it feels like another origin for the character who's had a bunch of origins. But this was an opportunity to tie all of the origins together and explain why what's happening is what's happening. And, but yeah, it was definitely early on. Yeah, I mean, it's issue 7 where we tell that story. So it was very early on that I had that thought. Yeah.
And so me personally, I'm a huge Hawkman fan. I prefer X-O Manowar because it's a little bit more personal to me, and I'm waiting to read that first story arc with my now 6-year-old.
Oh wow!
But we'll see what that happens. So obviously, you've mentioned Warren Simons quite a few times. You probably mentioned Dinesh Shamdasani. Obviously, they would have been like the creative guys behind Valiant.
Yeah,
we know. I believe they got bought out and they end up starting their own production company, but they created their own a new comic book publisher called Bad Idea.
Yeah.
Obviously, they kicked off with Matt Kidd, who I believe you're still friends with.
Yeah, Matt, yeah.
And then you kind of had one of the big, I guess it's a mini-series, Tankers. Where the hell did that come from?
Yeah,
Mech Armor Soldiers versus Dinosaurs?
Yeah, Tankers was the second.
Oh, yeah, you had Pizza Detective before that.
No. Pizza Detective came out after Tankers #1, but Tankers was the second. It was ENIAC #1, and then the next month was Tankers #1. So it was Bad Idea's second book. But yeah, Dinesh, I know back from Valiant as well. Huge part of the creative force behind Valiant. A lot of the other people at Bad Idea, like Josh Johns, Adam Freeman, Carl Bollers, they all worked at Valiant as well. So I know a lot of them from there. Tankers was just, again, I'm always trying to do things different when I write and challenge myself with different kinds of stories. No one had ever really asked me to be sort of satirical before, so it was an opportunity to really sort of stretch a different kind of writing muscle, which I'm always thankful for. And we just wanted to do something that was over the top and fun and absurd, but again, was about something below the surface as well. And for those who haven't read Tankers, it's a story about a team of mercenaries in giant mech suits who work for an oil company. The oil company invents time travel for the sole purpose of sending these mercenaries back in time to divert the comet to kill the dinosaurs. So we'll go one more lap around the universe, and we'll have all these many more hundreds of thousands of years of dinosaurs that will die and make more oil, so we don't run out of gas in the present. That's the whole concept of the series. But I had a tremendous amount of fun doing it. I really feel like it's a Bad Idea book, like the aesthetic of the company and like the PR stuff that they do, and like the tank video that I went and did that my friend Brock McKinney and I did together. We wrote the script for that, and Brock went and filmed it. And then Bad Idea came in, and we worked on everything together with it. It's just a side of me that I don't think a lot of people had seen before, and I was really grateful to be able to do it, and also to do it in what is arguably like a very dark time, and to just have some fun. And the response that we got to that tank video, if anybody hasn't seen it, go watch it. I'm driving a tank and shooting inflatable dinosaurs with a machine gun and everything else, and I don't know, people just got such a laugh out of it, I think, and I don't know, I was glad to be able to do it, so I try not to take myself too seriously, you know what I mean? So
Dinesh, obviously, it feels like he's been like a lifelong like comic book reader. I always see him posting like original art that he's got a hold of, and I think he might have owned it Valiant for quite some time before he ever even really relaunched it. Like, was waiting for the right time. So
yeah, I'm not sure. Nice. Yeah, huge comic book fan.
Got like eats and reads comic books.
Yeah. Encyclopedic knowledge. Very enthusiastic about the medium and the characters. The success story of Valiant when it relaunched. I don't think people really appreciate how impossible it is to pull something like that off. To take these characters nobody's ever heard of and build a shared universe and have it be as successful as what Warren and Dinesh and Adam and Hunter and Josh were able to do. It's really extraordinary to be able to do something like that, and then to go back and attempt it again, but in a totally different way with Bad Idea, completely different approach to the company, completely different distribution model, completely different styles of stories and publishing plans. And again, to be able to do it as successfully as they've been able to do it, it's really unheard of. So I feel lucky to be able to be a part of it the first time and the second time as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of viral marketing that they've done. Obviously, we've heard the story that Bad Idea is no more once they publish them.
Yeah, the candle that burns twice as bright burns half as long.
Is it true? They're just yanking our chain, right?
We'll have to see. As far as I know, it's over. That's what I've been told. I've been told it's over. So,
well, I have a theory. I don't want to put you in a bad spot. You might give away something you're not supposed to.
I'm a rock. I will not give away anything I'm not supposed to.
I'm assuming that maybe they changed some of the promises that they originally set out. They're just going to change the name of the company.
Yeah, I sincerely do not know. Yeah, I sincerely do not know.
Well, I hope it's not over. It's like the dream team, Dinesh and Ward and you and Matt and Tomas Giorello, and it's like yeah, it's like, my goodness, like all the best things about Valiant Comics decided to get back together again.
I hope so as well. We'll have to wait and see, and hopefully we'll know something pretty soon.
I imagine if they're going to move forward. I hope there's another shared superhero universe in our future, but if there isn't, there's like one perfect amount of time. It's 2012 to like 2017, right around there. Where
I just want to write pizza detective stories for the rest of my career. That's what I would do if I could.
Is that another original concept, or someone?
It is, yeah. I was just talking to Warren on the phone, and we were just, I don't even remember what the point of that call was. And I told a story about my brother, who worked at a pizza place. It was his first job, and I just had this idea for a pizza detective, and I wrote the script over the weekend and I sent it to him, and I was like, "You didn't ask for this, and I don't know if you want it, but here it is," And I think he called me a few weeks later and was like, "Dave Lapham has drawn it," and it just blew my mind. I mean, Lapham is a legend, and I think I've done 4 of them now at this point. Again, it's just a style of story that nobody's ever asked me to do before.
It's like an Adult Swim cartoon or something.
I pride myself on versatility. Like I write team books, I write solo character books, I write miniseries, I write 50 issues in a row of a character, I write original graphic novels, I've written stuff for kids, I've written stuff for grown-ups.
Got an 8-page Green Lantern story that made me cry.
Which one's that? Oh, the one from yeah.
That was a good one.
Yeah, I do have one big final Green Lantern story I'd love to do someday, like a 12-issue Green Lantern maxi series, that I would love to do someday that story would be a part of. But who knows if I'll ever get to do it.
It would be a travesty if they would. There's one last series I want to talk to. I know we're kind of going long here.
Oh, that's okay. Yeah.
So me personally, this is something you and I don't have in common. I don't really like Superman the movie that much. Okay. I really love Superman 2. Because I think Terrence Stamp's Zod is amazing.
Yeah.
As a kid, I just remember being mesmerized by that character as a villain.
For sure.
So I have a respect for Superman, but the original movie isn't my favorite. I know you have a different feeling. You had Superman 78 that obviously wrapped up this week. And I remember opening up the first issue, and I was blown away not by the fact that you were able to take a different spin on the character, but you were able to say so true to Christopher Reeve's Clark Kent and Margot Kidder's like Lois Lane and Gene Hackman's eventual appearance of Lex Luthor. I was like, my goodness, I can hear their voices in my head reading the dialogue.
Yeah.
Like the cadence was perfect.
So this would be the only example of a story, not even just Superman, but this particular version of Superman that I'm able to write from being a lifelong fan of it, right? Like, I couldn't. Is that why it
felt so different?
Yes, I mean, I know Superman 2, and you're wrong about what you said earlier. I was a bit young for Superman 78. I do remember seeing it, but Superman 2 is the one that really left an indelible.
Okay, so we do have that in common.
Yeah, Superman 2 left an indelible mark on me, not just as a fan of Superman as a character or comic books or whatever, just as like a life moment of experiencing entertainment. You know what I'm trying to say? Like,
I remember watching with my dad. I was amazed.
I remember seeing it in the theater, and I was at just the right age where when he steps out of the particle chamber and he kneels before Zod in my little kid head, I did not know what the world was going to do now because there was no more Superman. Like, that's where I was at. And then he crushes Zod's hand and the music swells, and everything. And it's like, I still get chills every time I say it, No matter how many times I say what I just said, my hair stands on end every time because I remember being in the theater and watching it, So when they came to me and asked me about Superman 78, I knew it already. You know what I mean? Like, it was there. Like, this is the one thing. You found the one thing that I don't have to go research, And I did. I went and watched all the movies again, and I even watched Supergirl and all that. And for Wilfredo Torres, it's very much the same way. He's a huge fan of those original films, and he knows those characters inside and out. And I think just the two of us working together on that story, the biggest compliment that I think we got was when the first issue came out. There's a moment, and I even wrote it in the script. I was like, well, Fredo, if this was a regular comic book, I would be doing sound effects, or Superman would be saying something here. But we're not going to do that. Like, we want to see if when readers read this, if they can hear the score. Right?
Oh, yeah, when he's flying.
Yeah. And so many people were like, when I saw that page, I heard the score in my head. Just think about how difficult that is to do in a comic book, which is a static medium with no sound of its own, no sound component of its own. For people to be able to look at an image, a still image, and hear music, right? Yeah. That's an impossibility. But this version of the character is such a touchstone, not just for fans of Superman or fans of comic books or whatever, but for like popular culture. There's nowhere you can go on the planet that people don't know Christopher Reeve Superman, right? I would argue it is the most popular version of the most popular character, like, on the planet. You know what I mean? Like, everybody knows it. Maybe Batman and maybe Spider-Man you could put into that category, but really nothing else as far as just global reach, And so to be able to do that story and to have people respond to it and feel that it's both new and fresh and adds something to that continuity, but also stays true to all the other things that are a part and parcel of that continuity. That's always the goal, right? That's Hawkman again. Like, we want to do something new and fresh and add to the continuity, but is recognizable to the continuity that people know already. And it's kind of what I try to do with all the stories that I do.
It's interesting. I actually watched a documentary. I believe Superman 3 was supposed to be a Brainiac story.
I've heard that originally it was, yeah.
They couldn't really come up with a way to do it, so you end up with that Richard Pryor, computer tech guy before they knew it. Yeah, computers really were. Yeah. So you're selling yourself short. You must have done some research because you've got the new Brainiac. You got a ship in there. The new Brainiacs are they're all like drones. We got like the real Brainiac. Yeah. I was like, he's going back on some Marv Wolfman stuff here. Yeah,
at this point, when Andrew Marino, the editor on the series, who's a great editor, I've worked with him on a ton of projects. Green Lantern, we launched Hawkman together, Freedom Fighters,
that's a good one.
Superman 78, like all those. Andrew edited all those books. When he asked me if I wanted to write Superman 78, he said he wanted it to be a Brainiac story. I was really happy about that because I've never written Brainiac really before, but I do know who Brainiac is at this point. I mean, I was an exclusive writer at DC for 7 years.
So you know the research along the way.
Comics, you know, and so I knew there was the robot skull head drone version of Brainiac, and I knew there was the green skin alien version of Brainiac, and so I thought, here in this universe, we can make our own continuity. We can give readers both of those characters, you know. Like,
I thought it was great. I was like, I just did a review on this 2 months ago.
Yeah, we can do all those fun things and cross them over together, and we can have Kandor, even though in the main universe Kandor is gone. You know, we can do all this stuff, you know, that they can't do in the mainstream superhero series. We're beholden to none of that. We're beholden to just these, you know, films, and that really opened things up. And you know, I immediately, when the editor said Brainiac, I thought of Kandor, and I thought, you know, I tried to think logically, you know, why would Donner have spent so much time on Superman's Kryptonian parents in the films, and sort of have all these ways to have these characters come back and to have Superman communicate with them through various technology and what have you? Why would he have done all those things if there wasn't some larger plan for Jor-El and Lara? Like, it seems like it would make sense to me that there was some larger plan. And so we tried to pay that off in our Superman 78 series.
You certainly did. I know a lot of people are already raving about the end of it. They're sad to see it go.
Yeah, I like to do ongoing series, but for something like this project specifically, which is supposed to be a film, you know, a 6-issue miniseries, I think is the right way to do it. To do it as an ongoing, it leaves the film realm now and becomes TV, you know. So
I think they're hoping for Superman 79. We shall see. So Robert, I guess we're almost up on an hour here. I do want to say thank you so much for your time. I'm an enormous fan. Do you have anything else that you wanted to get out there before we wrap this bad boy?
Yeah, I am working on a bunch of things, but it's nothing that I can talk about yet. None of it's been announced. Some of it's creator-owned. Some of it's for DC. Some of it's for other publishers that may or may not be going away. So, you know, there's a lot of stuff that'll be coming out, and hopefully some announcements will be coming soon. And I hope people check them out. You know, I appreciate you having me on and all the kind things you've said. And I don't know. Hopefully, I'll keep that batting average at 950.
Oh yeah, you're knocked it out of the park. I was just busting your chops a little bit at the beginning. So, like I said, thank you very much. I know the viewers are going to be even more excited about this than me because they know what an enormous fan I am. That, you know, it's like 3 years to making to finally get to talk to you here.
I appreciate it. I hope it was worth the wait.
Absolutely.